Hello, welcome to DePIN Unplugged. My name is Tristan and I'm joined here today with Robin from Wingbits, and we're really excited to dive in and hear the story of Wingbits. So Robin, I'll let you give a brief intro and then we can dive into the backstory.
Super, yeah, thanks Tristan. Really happy to be here. It's been a while since we caught up. I'm stuck here in Abu Dhabi under the missiles. I know that's where we met a few months back, but my name is Robin. One of the co-founders of Wingbits. My background real quick is, a little bit diverse. I started as a professional golfer, and after that I built 7 companies before this one in all kinds of different industries, but never in aviation and never in Web3. So this has definitely been, 2 years of heavy learnings. But Wingbits started with the idea that flight tracking, the way it's done now, it's all done by volunteers. And the entire industry relies on data being collected by volunteers for free. And we thought that the interest didn't really seem to align, where the company who got the data for free, they sold it for a bunch of money, whereas the volunteers collecting the data, they got subscription access, and it's a fun hobby, but we feel like there should be a better model. So that's why we started Wingbits. We have about 6,000 devices now globally. I think it's just over 120 countries. We're tracking about 93% of global flights at some point during the flight. So it's pretty close to global coverage. We sell data to a bunch of customers, but some of the ones that have been publicly announced are like Korean Airlines, Spire Global. I believe we have, actually, I don't know if we announced the other ones, so I'm going to be a little careful, but we have about a dozen right now. And looking to, get the last 7%, and then at some point, TG is going to come up here shortly, which is going to be super exciting to get over that hump. I think the market is a little interesting. And that's actually, I think to me, we can talk about that later, been a big challenge for the DePIN space, specifically where you have an actual regular business, and you want to try to figure out how do we properly transfer value from the business to the token. And I think we have some interesting ideas coming for that, but I think it's hasn't been functioning properly. But I think there's going to be some cool things coming because we have to figure it out over time. So yeah, I think that's briefly about that. But excited to be here.
Well, we might as well get into this DePIN talks. I actually think this is super interesting, and given that the name of the podcast is DePIN Unplugged, I would love to unplug this a little bit or dive into unpack this. I think would be the correct word for it. But yeah, so where do you see? I mean, I would say like DePIN is a very innovative front. I believe it's the future. Like we're going to be moving into these very largely, I would say, autonomous economies. And I think DePIN as a model, when you think of how devices work together, devices collect data and devices produce value, I see this being a very integral part of our future, as humanity. But right now we've gone through a lot of learning, I think, just collectively as an industry. And so I would be really curious to get your thoughts to dive into what you were just saying about, really just I would say the DePIN model in general and how it's been beneficial or any challenges that you faced in working through this with Wingbits.
Yeah, let's see if I can rack my brain and do it in the right order. So in general, I think the idea of the DePIN model is spot on. Essentially what you want to do is you want to build with the community and achieve overall success for everyone that participates, rather than building on the back of a community where you get all the success and benefits and they essentially get none. So the idea is spot on, and I think just in general, based on where the economy is heading, we have a very strong K-shaped economy where wealth is accumulated by the top percents and everyone else is kind of suffering. I think over time there has to be more and more businesses that actually allow to share the benefits with the people that actually provide the benefits. So I like that. I think it's perfect. I think the challenge, there's multiple challenges, I think, with the DePIN model. One being that if you start a fresh DePIN project, it's a brand new idea, you have various different business models. You have like ours. When we started, we knew from day one that we need to reach a certain scale of network size before it's monetizable. Well, you start that with the promise of look, we're going to start this project and we're going to reward with the token. Well, the token doesn't have any value until it's live, right? And the time frame from starting with the community to launching the token, the expectations are usually quite a bit shorter than maybe what you would optimally need to mature the business to have a demand side strong enough to sustain those rewards. But then you can have a business model. I think I like Specs. This model is really, really cool, where they essentially get a customer saying map this city and we pay you X. And then you can essentially, how much you're making, you release that to the community, and then they perform the action and they get rewarded right away. Obviously now Specs is rewarding a stable coin. I know they have a token coming out in the future. But so you have two different models. One, you can monetize with small communities, and one, you need a large community. On the large community, I think that's where the biggest challenge is, because you may take several years really before you're really in a position to sustainably launch the token. But that time frame is generally too long for the community to be accepting of that time frame. So I think that's a big challenge. I think another challenge is, okay, let's say you do launch the token, you do have some revenue. Well, usually most DePINs, they attempt to transfer value by buyback or buyback and burn. And this is just my opinion, but this is what I firmly believe. I firmly believe buybacks generally work really well in the beginning if you've done a good job of not having too much of a unlocks, too big of a circulating supply on day one. You can actually allocate enough revenue to buybacks to properly transfer value. The burn mechanism, well, we're going to have it when we launch. I am really questioning the burn mechanism if it actually makes an impact, because again, just my opinion, I do believe that since the token is actually not pegged to anything, mathematically burning the token doesn't increase the value. It's still just up to like how many people are speculating on this token. So you can probably withhold or use buybacks initially, maybe 9 to 12 months after a launch. Then I think you need to find more ways to add value to the community. And that can be done in many different ways. I mean, one could be, theoretically, if you have enough revenue and that scales faster than the circulating supply, then you can obviously continue with buybacks. But perhaps the tokens should actually give you access to something that provides a lot of value. That could be, is it a pool, a staking pool with stable yield? You have to stake the tokens to get stable yield. Is it, products? Is it perks? The token needs to actually unlock some additional value besides just the token price itself. So when you give these perks or yield or whatever, that really needs to be based on, in my opinion, the number of tokens you commit, not the value of the tokens you commit. Because if it's just the value, then that defeats the purpose of bringing extra value to the token. Because if you say, hey, commit this many tokens and you get X product, well, that X product will have a value. If the token price is way below the value of that product, people are probably going to come and buy the token in order to get that product. If the token price is really, really high, then okay, well, that doesn't make sense anymore. They may just sell off their tokens. So these essentially products or benefits or yield or whatever that you give to token holders, they will act as a balancing mechanism. Because the token price goes down, the products have, super high value, token price too high, they have lower value. Because I think for a DePIN, the absolutely most crucial aspect to the whole business is the community. Because without the underlying foundation of data providers or people doing specific actions, you have nothing. So I think you have to figure out what is a reasonable return for the community. And because most DePINs are businesses, they're not going to be 10,000% up. And, you'd rather have look like it's got to be worthwhile to be in here long term. So based on what you need to provide your community, you need to figure out these perks or benefits or things that unlock by having a token. And then the other challenge besides that, I think, is the strategy for actually launching the token. There's been a playbook. You pay a bunch of money, you get these larger exchanges. You do a bunch of marketing to essentially pump the token. Well, I think that makes sense if your token is your core product. Like if you're a meme token, well, you only have the token, right? I don't think that makes sense for what we're trying to do, which is building sustainable businesses that are beneficial for the participants over the long term. So I think the playbook has changed a bit. The market is obviously kind of bad right now also. But what I've realized and what I've decided for myself is if you have to pay a ton of money and give away a ton of tokens to get a listing, you are not ready for that listing. Because you don't have the organic demand to maintain it. You're probably going to spend yourself into bankruptcy trying to maintain volumes and trying to maintain price on those massive exchanges. So I think actually what I would love for the whole industry to go to is essentially everyone has to start on a DEX, and then you graduate to a centralized exchange. Because then if you have enough, if you look at Bitcoin, look at Ethereum, look at Solana, well, they started just the community believes in this token. They like this token. Dogecoin started the same way. If you have enough of a community and interest in buying your token, all these large exchanges are going to list you anyway. So I think paying to get listed there is kind of I wouldn't call it cheating, but it's not the correct way of getting listed. Now, if you get a large listing without paying a lot of money and without paying a lot of tokens, that's obviously the best case scenario. Then you can go that route. So I think, that's the view probably need to take. If you look at the data, 99% of people that pay a bunch of money to list on these exchanges, like that, they fail anyway. So it's not, everyone used to tell me, oh, you have to get, you have to get this, you have to get that. But then if you look at the data, that's not true at all. Like it's the opposite of true. I think all those projects would have been better off just going on a DEX and maintain a really nice pool and preserve the value for the community rather than try to hype the token. So yeah, so those that I guess that's my view. But again, still, we're still figuring it out. At some point, I think we have some good ideas for how we're gonna figure it out. But the key is obviously, the demand side is still the key, because if you have a really, really massive demand side and revenue, you also have a lot of flexibility in how to adjust and try things to make sure the community gets value over time.
And I think this gets to like a few really interesting points. So the first off, I really appreciate what you last said about I would say progression, because I think there's like this balance between, I would say, like organic and inorganic growth. So it's like, okay, like how do you build a community and develop the demand for the token or even the product in general? And yeah, if you see it in other industries as well. If you pay, like, yeah, you could pay a lot of money and have a really nice song made that you get played on the radio, get a lot of exposure to. But if there's not a lot of substance beneath, like you probably won't become like a superstar musician or something like that. So yeah. It's like and there's lots of cases of people paying to have like one song or like a one hit viral video on the internet, and then that's their 15 minutes and that's it. And I think like this whole progression, I think it makes a lot of sense, because like it's the same deal with like and this kind of also gets maybe into like how you view like this balance between token and equity in a company, where it's like if you can balance those two out, like usually don't start off with an like a IPO, right? Like most companies don't just like get founded in IPO. It's like, okay, well, you get your first round of funding and then you get your next round of funding, and then you go through X number of rounds before it's like you get acquired or you IPO, and or you just stay private forever, which is, I guess, another option. But yeah, it makes sense, perfect sense to me. That's the same with like your token. It's like, hey, like when you launch, you work with the DEX, and then maybe you get to like across a bunch of DEXs, and then as that demand grows, then like organically the next step is going on to a centralized exchange. In which case, at that point, they want you to be on their platform because they see that the demand is there. So
exactly.
Not really a question, just commentary. I didn't think through this before, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, but I think so. But again, like this is my first time ever building in the space. But if it's clear that the way most things are built in the space in terms of these type of projects have not worked out, to the full extent that they could. But I think there's a few changes we'll probably see over time in the space in general. I think we'll see probably like Web 2, like they start as a traditional Web 2 company. They find like product market fit, they mature the business somewhat, they have revenue, and then they add on the token side as way to scale way faster and supercharge the business when they already have some maturity. Because then when you have that, then you can actually better meet the expected timeline between like entering the industry and launching a token and doing so sustainably. I think also, obviously we've learned a lot starting Wingbits. If I got to restart it, I would, now I know how difficult it is actually to get to a launch. I would have set different expectations for the community because I didn't know better. I just said like, we're going to launch this date. Well, we pushed the launch several times. And believe me, like I want nothing more than launch a token because it's super stressful. And it's a big kind of like a headache at times trying to do that right. I would have set different expectations. And then I think I would have approached the network build out differently. I think based on what we learn now and how we're going to approach, future potential expansions of the network is can you actually monetize properly while building out the network? And I do think there's really good models for that. We are working on some pretty interesting customer negotiations now, where if you know you need to reach a large scale of network before you can monetize, well, is there, I think you have to spend more time trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I monetize while I build out? To build out on behalf of a customer that needs that, or like, do you add on something additional to, if you're going to build out a network anyway, okay, well, let's say I want to build out flight tracking. Maybe there's other data points that another customer wants that I can add in so I can actually monetize until I reach my goal of full scale. So I think you really have to, I would have done it differently. I would have done way more, validation on the monetization of like while we're building. Now we did a lot of validation on when we're done building, there's a big market. And actually, because that's going to be important if you have to reach scale. So it's a lot of learnings, but more focus on generating money faster in whatever way possible, so you can actually start having more flexibility in the way you transfer value to the community.
Yeah, I think that's and it's interesting because then and I guess like maybe I'm injecting like more of my personal opinion here, but it's good to have a company that's driven by revenue. So it's like, hey, like we have customers, these customers want this. We build this because there's demand for this. And then that direct demand is translated via the, currency. So it's like, hey, like we'll pay for this. Okay, cool. Yeah. Like, we'll, you want this data point? Let's make sure we get you this data point. Because like there is a lot of those cases, like, I mean, even because it can be very customer driven where certain customers want a very specific data point. And then, other customers want that too, but not everybody knows they want it sometimes because people are at different levels of maturity also in their companies. Mm-hmm. And their products. And sometimes there's a very specific data point that they like one person wants that the other person hasn't even thought about yet. And then once you offer it, they're like, wait, that would be kind of useful for us. So let's take that data point and as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I think, from when you collect data, I think, and this is just what I perceived, I think one kind of big challenge is also when you sell the data, how do you know the data is actually accurate, right? Like if I collect, I'm just gonna draw something out of thin air, but like air quality. Okay, if I say, hey, the PM 2.5 here is 87. Well, how do they know that I measure that correctly? What are the benchmarks? Like, can you compare to something else? I think that's a big challenge. I think the one kind of thing that is I really like with flight data is that it's regulated and standardized. It looks the same everywhere, and there's a million sources to cross-check. Was a plane actually there, or was it not? Yeah. So, like how do you make sure it's correct and verifiable? I think that's something, because it's going to be really hard to sell weather data to the government unless the government knows that is correct. Because we just can buy the data, but how do we trust it? Or something that is maybe not so easy to verify, and maybe weather data is actually easy to verify. I'm just making examples.
Well, I think it's a fair one. It also gets this interesting point of, do you view the blockchain as a good mechanism for verifying this data across different, let's say it could be weather sensors or flight trackers, et cetera, versus say like a traditional like Web 2 model where you'd be getting data, submitting it to a database, and you're just checking that internally?
So I don't think I could speak on that, because we do not do that. We verify the stations and the participation and the hosts. We do not verify the data on the blockchain because, again, one, latency is very important for us. And it's like 3 terabytes of data a day that we collect right now. And with those two aspects being, a lot of data and latency being important, it's not suitable for us to do that. But there's a lot of there's a lot of new companies I see starting now, and essentially all they focus on is verifying results. Essentially, if you have a network of agents, right, built by a decentralized network that build their small models to verify specific things, and you can get you have multiple models verifying that or looking at the data and giving a trust score, and then you can have a trust score on the model itself, like how good has this model been. And you can go through a step-by-step process, perhaps, of verifying the data that way through another, decentralized network. be worthwhile. But yeah, I'm not an expert on that. Luckily it's easy to verify our data, so we haven't had to do too much work on it. But I'm sure there's opportunities to be the verification layer if you do that in a very fast and efficient and cheap way.
Yeah, because I think the key thing is just, it's good to have the trust, because to that point, when you're working with a government customer, or even any high profile customer, to be honest, like, they need reliable data. It's a very important point, as to be like, can I trust this when you're getting this data? So one of the things I was also interested in that we had briefly touched on earlier in like the network development side, do you think with things being, let's say if you were going to build Wingbits again from the ground up, would you focus more in specific targeted areas based on the customer demand, or would you still try to focus on a global network build out? How would that have changed at all?
Yeah, maybe I would have tried to, I think, because there are, now with the customers we have, we're all obviously starting to receive more and more like feedback on why did they want to buy our data. And it's, it's for multiple reasons. Like, one is essentially, one big client said they buy from everybody else, but they added on our data. And the reason was we have better ground coverage at many airports than the other data sources. Now, overall, we may not have more data, but we're very good complement, because they get a fuller picture by adding our data. Another one is like, oh, well, you actually fill in a lot of gaps in Southeast Asia or Middle East compared to the other data sources. So we probably could have done, what we could have done, I think, was we knew what areas that our network was struggling. We could have probably done like, look, if we know that there's a lack of coverage in these regions, if we build out the network on behalf of you there, will you pre-commit to buying the data? Okay, cool. Well, if they say yes, zero risk to them. You just say, look, if we deliver, you tell them like, where would you want the coverage? We want it here. This is important than here. Okay. If we deliver this, and you have an SLA saying like, if we meet these requirements, we build this, will you pay X for the data? Well, if they say yes, well, they need the data. They have no risk. And if you deploy the devices properly and it meets their requirements, well, you have an income stream coming in right away. And then it's a win-win for both, right? Because they have zero risk. If you don't deliver, they pay nothing. So we probably could have done that. And, because then what you can also do is you probably need to, you could approach it, it's like, look, like, we don't need to grow the network as fast as we can. Instead, you say, okay, if we deployed our map and we knew that, well, these are the regions that we have committed customers. Well, it's similar to Spexy, right? You can't just go with a drone anywhere and map it. Like, you have to map where the customer wants it. We could approach this from the same way. Look, you can only deploy in these regions. If you deploy elsewhere, that's fine, but you're not getting rewarded. And because then you can build a community that's like, okay, only Middle East, only these parts of Southeast Asia, you have this revenue coming in, which is X. Well, then you can say, look, like, we don't know how long it's going to take to launch our token. Knowing what I know now, I could probably set more like, well, we would need to reach, these levels of revenue before it's like super sustainable to launch the token. Well, then you can just pay out stablecoin in the beginning. Based on the revenue you have, it's split by the miners. They can still earn tokens on DevNet, and then they can get those retroactively along with the future tokens. So they get essentially double. They get the stability of the stablecoin, and they get the tokens in DevNet. But then I think you remove a large portion of the stress of launching the token before you feel necessarily ready. And I think the community understands that this is the view you're taking because you've explained it properly and set the correct expectations up front. And you're probably going to get, if you say, look, like, we don't know how long it's going to take before we launch the token, we estimate 4 or 5 years. I don't know. Well, you're probably only going to get the people that are like, okay, well, this is reasonable to me. It makes sense. This is planned. And you don't get the people that, well, I want the token now and I hope it spikes at 10,000% and I'm gone. Well, maybe you don't want them. I don't know. So I think if but obviously now I know more. I definitely don't know everything, far from it, but I think I would have done a much better job setting these expectations. And I think that would have been better for everybody, because it would have just been like more sustainable and more stress-free.
Yeah, I think that's well, and it's interesting because it is like breaking, I would say, the typical crypto mold of things, right? Like there's a lot of this instant gratification that kind of gets put in, like chasing the 10,000x token. I mean, it's not going to be 10,000x forever. It's 10,000x for maybe a few hours or a day or 2 days or something like that. And exactly. I think that and I like this model as well, where you do, like, say, some type of stablecoin payout until you're ready to launch a token. And I think just balancing the expectations, like, that can be a tough one, because especially with the DePIN models, like, it's a lot closer to a traditional business in the sense that you're building long term. It's not building for like a 1 or 2 year hype cycle. It's building for 5-10 years or more of value. And exactly. I think that's what actually to me makes it so interesting, is it's like, all right, so it's this, I love this use of the technology, and I love this way of like long-term thinking of trying to say, hey, like, it's not like this weird spike. It's like trying to build a lot of value over a long time. So it's like just thinking like, hey, we have this future machine economy. You can deploy an IoT device. This IoT device is going to have value for many, many years. And I mean, perhaps there will be more IoT devices or more add-ons or extensions or plugins or whatever. But there is going to be this value that accrues over time. And I think for a lot of people, like with this stablecoin idea, like I think this is something that keeps people engaged. And a lot of the people who are going to be out there putting hardware devices on the rooftops or places of work or wherever it is, a lot of them, like, I mean, this is something that I think they are sufficiently invested in. I mean, I guess like my experiences with hobbyists mainly. So it's like thinking about how hobbyists get excited about this, or if you can get more people excited about, say, like putting an antenna up and collecting data. I think this is a good thing. I mean, of course, some people are putting in like, okay, yeah, I'll put it on my roof and I'll make some money off of it. That sounds great. But I also think that there's a good chunk of people who are excited about like this type of, like, I guess, engagement with how they can view the data.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like what not everybody, but I think there's a fairly large segment that are participating in DePIN projects that view it more as a type of passive income. So when they get their tokens, in many cases they sell them and they put it into stables or Bitcoin or something like that, right? They don't sit and hold everything, like they actually cash out. So stables, for because like if you buy a $500 device, well, the way probably most people would look at it is like, how fast do I make the money back for the $500 I spent? Because anything past that is just a win to me, right? As long as it doesn't cost more to run the device than your. Well, with stables and taking a more like, not like, hey, let's grow as fast as we can, but it's like, let's grow in this region because here we have revenue. Then you can literally, like, obviously it should still be performance based, right? If you deploy and you deploy in the basement and you get nothing, well, there needs to be a performance aspect to it. But you could actually tell them up front, like, look, if you deploy here and you meet these criteria, this is kind of the ROI, because this is the contract size. After we reach this level, so it becomes a lot easier. And I think the hardest, because obviously you can raise a bunch of money and pay out stable coins, but that's not sustainable long term. And especially unless you take that into consideration when you raise and this is exactly how many stations we are going to deploy to pay out to. Because if, the way we approached it, like we went in, we saw how other DePINs did it, Helium, and, they grew a lot in the beginning. Was like, look, let's just get as many as possible, because all we thought about was reaching global coverage, because then we know we can sell the data. Well, if you raise money and then, station count blows to, 30,000, well, then it's no longer sustainable to pay out. You're going to run out of money. So I think you're better off spending way more time ahead of time getting some of these pre-commitments. It's going to be way harder to raise, compared to if we have 10,000 stations in 6 months. Okay, well, that looks great. You have a lot of users. So you're probably going to have to do a lot more bootstrapping for a while, get these pre-commitments. Then with the pre-commitments, it's going to be super easy to raise. And then you start deploying with the community and growing more in a very strategic and targeted pattern rather than just spray the map with devices. That's how I would have done it if I could read it.
Do you see a place for public money in driving some of these networks in the future? Because it does become part of an infrastructure layer, and there's some value in that as well.
I think so. I think the easiest way to to get that to happen was if you could actually tie the tokens to an underlying value. You could peg it to an underlying value, right? For example, if I started Wingbits and every project has the foundation, right? That isn't just its own thing. Well, if that foundation instead was an asset manager, okay, well, instead of putting money to buybacks, I'm just putting money in an asset manager. And that asset manager manages obviously the cash in a very liquid way because people need to be able to get their money out. But the tokens are pegged to the total value of that asset manager. If you have a really healthy business over here that keeps adding cash to the asset manager, that value is going to grow over time, both from the added cash, but also from the returns that the assets generate. And then it becomes very clear. I believe in this business. The financials are solid. There is revenue going in. But even if this business over here would go bankrupt one day, well, if that's after 10 years and the asset manager holds a huge amount of assets that is going to grow themselves over time, the token never becomes worthless. It's always pegged to something that is just going to continue. Obviously, from a regulatory point of view, that I don't know how to do that right now. I think that would be, it's a security. Yeah. But if it was from a public money and risk perspective, for a later stage where you have really good financials and you're profitable and the margins look nice and everything, well, then it's okay, now it's no longer a case that's oh, we don't understand the token. How risky is that? How do you maintain? It's just very clear. That would be cool.
Yeah, and that's interesting on the regulatory front because it's in direction like a stable. Then I would imagine that there's some regulations that it's going to be dealing with in many different markets. Have you run into any regulatory things right now, even just with the network itself, or any considerations?
No. So the data we collect is open radio, so it's available everywhere. There's 2 markets that are very so any sanctioned country. It's not illegal itself to track the data, but we cannot sell devices, send devices there, and we cannot reward people in those markets. Where we're not allowed to set them up is, Egypt do not allow these devices to be set up, in general. And China, it's not illegal to do this in China, but it's very difficult to get approval to say, okay, well, we set up the devices there and we take the data out of China to us. So those markets are tricky. But besides those markets and the sanctioned countries, it's, this is how it's done. It's regulated, and it's open for anyone to capture.
Interesting. With countries like Egypt or China, do you think it changes with time? Do you think they become more open to these types of networks potentially?
With China, they have their own, flight tracking networks in China.
Right.
Yeah. So it is being done that way. It's just I think with China, you probably would have to, you would have to figure out how to form a partnership or either set up a subsidiary there that's, adhering to their regulation and store the data according to how they want to store it. So it's not that they're open to it. It's just one, I don't know how to approach that market. We don't, it would be great for us to have that market, but no other network has it either. So it's not like we need to get the other markets first. I will absolutely try to figure out how to enter China in a way that where I'm like, okay, we're doing it the right way and everyone is good. For Egypt, we are in the process of actually evaluating, and we're in several discussions to try to figure out how to navigate that market from a deployment point of view.
Are these the remaining 7% that we were talking about earlier? Like these?
No, I mean, some countries like Russia, we don't have stations there. The other networks do have some from before. We're definitely there's definitely parts of Southeast Asia that we're still needing. I mean, we've now deployed a lot of devices, so we have good coverage in Japan and Korea. Indonesia, we're going to deploy a lot of devices. Like Australia, we're missing a little bit. So we're missing a little bit here and there. And some areas we're much stronger, especially on lower altitude. But so it's not like one specific region, but definitely in Southeast Asia is the one we're focusing on besides MENA region right now.
Okay, very interesting. So then, I would say like going into this, do you see expanding into, like we talked about Spexy and drones, like other domains outside of the aircraft? Do you see this being applicable for Wingbits?
Yeah, definitely. Because, there's going to be a lot of data points that kind of are, have really good synergy with what we do. We do have upgradable slots in our hardware, so we can actually track more than one data point. It's just we need to decide which one. From a drone perspective, UK regulated 978 megahertz. I think drones would make sense for us to go into more from like, right now you have some really cool projects like SkySafe, for example, that are very advanced in drone detection. There, I think, I don't want to misrepresent, but I think what they do is like, well, they can track drones in general, but they spend a lot of time on tracking drones that are monitoring, like, are they flying there when they're not supposed to, and so on. I think for our use case in terms of drones would make a lot of sense for when, drone deliveries is the norm and you have commercial droning everywhere, or, self-flying, flying taxis, autonomous flying taxis, things that want to be tracked. That's what we're going to be good at tracking. Things that don't want to be tracked, I think is better served by someone else from an intelligence point of view. So drones is definitely one of them. As markets, set their regulation, we know kind of like, okay, well, we need to upgrade these devices in this country to this frequency and so on. In the US, we do have the remote ID receiver already in the devices. I'm not a technical expert, but the challenge that I just feel with remote ID is that the range is quite short. So the density you would need would be so high that it would be kind of hard to figure out how to do that properly. So perhaps what happens is, there's going to be certain drone corridors. Maybe we will have to set out like, okay, well, in this specific corridor, we need a higher density of devices, and we would have to, allocate additional rewards for drones captured in this corridor, something like that. But then, you have different modes of transport. Maybe some of them will make sense for us to track. A good synergy with both our customers and our other data sets that we collect.
Very interesting. Well, and also, I mean, it seems like, even like UAE might be a really good place to test some of these things out. Like, I know they're very forward thinking on a lot of technology fronts.
I think so. That's why, I moved to Abu Dhabi now 3 months ago. We're participating in this program called Hub 71. It's just like a government innovative startup initiative program. So it's really good. So I'm, hopefully, obviously, it goes back to normal. But I think there's just a lot of stuff happening from, from Gulf East. Obviously, a lot of stuff happening elsewhere too. But I think they take a good look at, or a good view on regulation where it's very business friendly and it's fairly easy to navigate and, try things without you jumping, going through like so much red tape.
Yeah, I'm ready for drone delivery. I'm really excited about the idea of just ordering something and having a drone come and bring me, I don't know, a pizza or something. Yeah,
it'd be awesome.
To your window and just open it up. Very great.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. Thank you. I don't know how it's going to exactly work, but that would be Definitely really cool. So yeah, with other domains, like I know, I guess I'd be curious, like where you see some like the directionality of like just the DePIN market in general. Like where do you see some of like these like frontier? I mean, obviously, I'm very biased, like coming from space. I think space is a very big frontier. But yeah, curious your perspective on where you see uh, some of the directions that this might go. Energy is a big one right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, energy is cool. I mean, if you look at the war now, like, and this is like, is it maybe a wild idea, but like, I talked to a guy earlier, and they're hitting all the radars, right? That's what they're trying to hit up. Like, so, like critical infrastructure, like to what extent could that be built at a smaller scale by a community? Like, can you develop, like, I know a radar is not cheap, but like, is there a way to have essentially a backup that is ran by a community that is like not sent, one big centralized piece of hardware is like spread everywhere. Energy, I think, it'd be interesting to see like water, like monitoring water quality, water levels through a decentralized network. Like, that'd be kind of nice to get, you get faster, faster heads up. Like, hey, it's raining in the northern US, or snow is melting. Okay, well, is Mississippi River going to flood down in, Tennessee area? Well, you can probably, if you have the sensor network that's ran by the community, like earthquake monitoring, I know there's always something out there, but like any type of monitoring system, because it just doesn't make sense for one company to deploy and maintain infrastructure all around the world to try to get these insights. So if you need large scale of sensors or data collection, it just lends itself really well to a DePIN model. Space, I think, we shot that one satellite as a proof of concept. Like, I would love nothing more if we could figure out a way to like, how do we get, shoot more satellites and get people to own a piece of the satellite, and with the community we build a space-based network as well. And we've been looking at that, and it's just really hard on the unit economics side to make sense of getting a return to those people.
For now,
yeah. For now, yeah. And I think also as the Web3 space, evolves and there's more creative and more sustainable models being produced, you're gonna be able to take on more complex challenges as well. So I think it's gonna get there. I think it's gonna, and it makes sense. I mean, everyone should get paid if they do something of vital importance for someone that monetizes that importance. Like, let's figure out just how to do that sustainably.
That's going to be critical. Okay, so to wrap things up, do you have any advice to founders in the space with this? I mean, you have quite a bit of experience. What would be, I would say, any advice you give?
In general, or for Web3 based on?
I would just say in general, honestly. And you can specifically tie in Web3, but general. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things that at least just my personal opinion, is like, one, it's totally fine to not know like what you're doing, and just admit that like you're wrong and you don't know what you're doing, but you have to be willing to just ask a lot of questions, and just be very open-minded to learning. I think some people may go in and they feel like they feel stupid to admit that they don't know, or asking questions that it's like, that's like the one thing. I think, you don't necessarily have to know about the domain you build in. There's obviously big benefits of knowing about the domains. Some domains, if you want to be a doctor, yeah, please, know what you're doing. But most of the time, you don't really need to know. And there's a lot of benefit coming from being naive and going into space, because you look at it with a fresh set of eyes, and you're like, well, why is it being done this way? Whereas, if you have 20 years experience, a lot of times I say, well, this is how we've always done it. So I think just if it's interesting, like you don't have to have the background in that space. Like, every business I built have been in something I've never done before, and most of the time it's worked out, and sometimes failed a couple of times and worked out really well sometimes. But I think that takes me to the next one. Is like, it's totally fine to you will fail, and it's okay to try and fail. Now on the Web3 side, I think it's just more focus on knowing how you're going to generate revenue from day one, and focus on, okay, well, as soon as we start involving the community, what is our plan to, as quickly as possible, be able to give value to them and take your time on launching the token. Like, that's going to take long. You need longer than you think, way longer.
That's good advice. Well, thank you so much, Robin. It's been great to have you.
Thank you.
And have a great day, and we'll talk very soon. Yes.
Thanks, Tristan. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for watching, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.